This is the 2016 AP English Language and Composition FRQ for rhetorical analysis. Okay, this one is going to spill onto two slides. The majority of it is here. You might have seen that way down at the very bottom, there is that go on to the next page. And if we do, the format's a little bit different, but these are the last three paragraphs. And it also includes our footnote information that we will need. So we'll have 40 minutes for this, and that includes time to read, write, plan. So not a whole lot of time. Don't worry if you see a lengthier excerpt. Don't be intimidated by that. You are able to get through them just as quickly. Just make sure that you are looking for the rhetorical appeals and the rhetorical devices, including ones that you've been taught in your AP language courses, and you'll be fine. So let's go ahead and start. On June 11th, 2004, Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, delivered the following eulogy to the American people in honor of former US President Ronald Reagan. So this is being delivered to the American people to honor former President Reagan, with whom she had worked closely. Read the eulogy carefully, then in a well-developed essay, analyze the rhetorical strategies that Thatcher uses to convey her message. Okay. So we have to analyze the sources Thatcher uses, and the AP always tends to be a little bit purposefully ambiguous here because they want you to figure out the message, okay? So that's one thing that you have to make sure you note when you write to the rhetorical analysis prompt. When you develop your working thesis and then your actual thesis, you're trying to develop a two-prong, at the very least, thesis that includes the purpose. And I'll explain this in a few minutes when we get there. The purpose, you don't want to just say to convey her message. Her message is what? What was the purpose? That's the purpose. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin with reading and annotating just to kind of get those ideas out there. What rhetorical appeals or devices are we going to find? So here we go. We have lost a great president, a great American, and a great man, and I have lost a dear friend. In his lifetime, Ronald Reagan was such a cheerful and invigorating presence that it was easy to forget what daunting historic tasks he set himself to. So we have some diction here, and then we're also juxtaposing the diction so that we get his personality versus his tasks, profession maybe. He sought to mend America's wounded spirit, to restore the strength of the free world, and to free the slaves of communism. Even there, we've got some parallelism: to mend, to restore, to free. So let's just put up parallel bars. These were causes hard to accomplish and heavy with risk, and yet they were pursued with almost a lightness of spirit, for Ronald Reagan also embodied another great cause, what Arnold Bennett once called the great cause of cheering us all up. His policies had a freshness and optimism that won converts from every class and every nation, and ultimately from the very heart of the evil empire. Okay, and our footnote is going to tell us that was the phrase that Reagan used to describe the Soviet Union. Yet his humor often had a purpose beyond humor. In the terrible hours after the attempt on his life, his easy jokes gave reassurance to an anxious world. They were evidence that in the aftermath of terror and in the midst of hysteria, one great heart, at least, remained sane and jocular. They were truly grace under pressure, and perhaps they signified a grace of a deeper kind. So some repetition. Ronnie himself certainly believed that he had been given back his life for a purpose. As he told a priest after his recovery, whatever time I've got left now belongs to the big fella upstairs. And surely it is hard to deny that Ronald Reagan's life was providential when we look at what he achieved in the 8 years that followed. So something that we want to note here, this Ronnie, that's a personal term. It's a term of endearment. It's a nickname. It implies closeness. So it's going to demonstrate, that's right, implies closeness. And this, what I'm writing right here, this is something that I would personally know in my mind. So my annotation would have probably just been the box or a circle for Ronnie. But for you guys to understand, we're talking about a former president. No one is just going to walk up and call him Ronnie unless they worked closely and are friendly. So that's the purpose of this. We're tasked with analyzing rhetorical choices, she chooses to refer to him as Ronnie because it's going to demonstrate for her audience that, hey, I have the ethos, the credibility, or the authority to speak about this man because we were close. Okay? All right. Moving on, others prophesied the decline of the West. He inspired America and its allies with renewed faith in their mission of freedom. Others saw only limits to growth. He transformed a stagnant economy into an engine of opportunity. Oh, look, a third time. Others hoped, at best, for an uneasy cohabitation with the Soviet Union. He won the Cold War not only without firing a shot, but also by inviting enemies out of their fortress and turning them into friends. So a little bit of inversion here from enemies to friends. But here, this repetition, again, if you've been taught anaphora, fabulous. If not, guess what? Just refer to it as repetition. You can clearly see that we're repeating the same word in these paragraphs. Now, why might we do the others? It's going to draw a distinction. And again, I would not write this in a test-taking scenario. I would not write what I'm about to write. I would understand it. Now, if you're annotating and an idea strikes you that you think you'll forget, then jot it down even in shorthand. I'm just going to write draws distinction between Ronald Reagan and others. That's the purpose of this anaphora here, okay? I cannot imagine how any diplomat or any dramatist could improve on his words to Mikhail Gorbachev at the Geneva summit. Let me tell you why it is we distrust you. Those words are candid and tough, and they cannot have been easy to hear, but they are also a clear invitation to a new beginning and a new relationship that would be rooted in trust. We live today in the world that Ronald Reagan began to reshape with those words. It is a very different world with different challenges and new dangers. All in all, however, it is one of greater freedom and prosperity, one more hopeful than the world he inherited on becoming president. As Prime Minister, I worked closely with Ronald Reagan for 8 of the most important years of all our lives. We talked regularly both before and after his presidency, and I've had time and cause to reflect on what made him a great president. So here we have an anecdote, and that again is going to reinforce her ethos, her credibility to speak on the subject. Ronald Reagan knew his own mind. He had firm principles and, I believe, the right ones. He expounded them clearly, he acted upon them decisively. When the world threw problems at the White House, he was not baffled or disoriented or overwhelmed. He knew almost instinctively what to do. Now, I want to point this out. This is not something that we've done too much, but you've got to remember that aside from your rhetorical appeals and your rhetorical devices, that authors use tone and voice and structure to have a rhetorical effect. This is a great example, what we've highlighted as a structural technique, because it's a standalone paragraph amidst all these other ones that says quite simply, he knew almost instinctively what to do. He knew what to do. You're going to capture the essence of the man in that one standalone paragraph, okay? Moving on. When his aides were preparing option papers for his decision, they were able to cut out entire rafts of proposals that they knew the old man would never wear. When his allies came under Soviet or domestic pressure, they could look confidently to Washington for firm leadership. And when his enemies tested American resolve, they soon discovered that his resolve was firm and unyielding. So a few things here. We've got some parallelism again. When his allies came, when his enemies tested, when his aides were preparing, all of these when situations followed by what actually happens. So this parallelism here is also used in conjunction with juxtaposition to demonstrate what he does with his allies or friends versus the enemies. Yet his ideas, so clear, were never simplistic. He saw the many sides of the truth. Yes, he warned that the Soviet Union had an insatiable drive for military power and territorial expansion, but he also sensed that it was being eaten away by systemic failures impossible to reform. Yes, he did not shrink from denouncing Moscow's evil empire, but he realized that a man of goodwill might nonetheless emerge from within its dark corridors. So the president resisted Soviet expansion and pressed down on Soviet weakness at every point until the day came when communism began to collapse. A lot of pathos here, strong diction. Beneath the combined weight of those pressures and its own failures. And when a man of goodwill did emerge from the ruins, President Reagan stepped forward to shake his hand and to offer sincere cooperation. And that's pathos too, the imagery there of extending a hand, friendship, reconciliation. I'm just going to put imagery. Remember, of course, that pathos is diction and imagery combined. Nothing was more typical of Ronald Reagan than the large-hearted magnanimity. To be magnanimous, of course, is to be gracious and so forth, compassionate. And nothing was more American. Therein lies perhaps the final explanation of his achievements. Ronald Reagan carried the American people with him in his great endeavors because there was perfect sympathy between them. He and they loved America and what it stands for, freedom and opportunity for ordinary people. Certainly a lot of pathos here in the end as well. Love this image of Ronald Reagan carrying the American people, right? Okay, so we've made it through. Now our job is to determine what was Thatcher's purpose and how are we going to explain what rhetorical devices or analyze what rhetorical devices and appeals she uses to serve her purpose. Okay. Well, we know that her purpose was to memorialize Ronald Reagan, okay? He's deceased, and we know that a eulogy is a speech that you would give at a funeral or a burial or a memorial, things like that. So we need to come up with some ideas here. And I think that what we will do is put our working thesis, and we want, again, this at least two prongs, so we're identifying two devices or appeals at least that we're going to tackle, and then make sure that we specify what Thatcher's purpose was. So we're gonna write in her eulogy to Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher depends on purposeful repetition. Let's do juxtaposition also. Normally I write these out with you, but this time I did not, I apologize. So repetition, juxtaposition, and I think a deep appeal to pathos. And a deep, believe it or not, that's an A. Appeal to pathos. To accurately, this is where we have to figure out the message. To accurately, what was her purpose? Her purpose was to accurately capture a man she knew and admired. It's a rough working thesis. I could certainly rephrase that, and I can say, you know, she does this, this, and this in order to best honor a fallen US president, something like that. As long as you specify what her purpose is, then you will be okay. Now, I listed a few things: repetition, juxtaposition, and the appeal to pathos. And I think that what I'll probably do is do repetition by itself and then juxtaposition and pathos together. Because in the rhetorical analysis, we're shooting for a 4-paragraph response, intro, 2 bodies, and your conclusion. So let's go ahead and see how we might plan that out. Body paragraph number 1 is going to be about repetition. And repetition, of course, there are so many rhetorical devices that function as forms of repetition. I might want to use the word repetition. I might want to talk about parallel structure, anaphora. I'm not going to be doing anything with alliteration, I think, in this one, or epistrophe or anything quite like that. So let's just plan our ideas. In the previous videos, I have been pairing my counter argument in my second body paragraph, but I've said multiple times that it's really up to you where you want to assert a counter argument. And I think that I'm actually going to show you how I would do it in the very first body paragraph. And I even think that I would probably open the first body paragraph with my counter argument. And I'm going to say something along the lines of repeated words or phrases can bog down any speech or eulogy and can lead to, I don't know, audiences tune out. So there's actually already, I'm asserting that there's a problem. There's so much repetition in Thatcher's eulogy, and repeated words and phrases can get actually kind of boring. And I might even expand on that and say that it kind of walks a thin line with hyperbole, especially if it's for a politician. Might seem like you're trying to aggrandize the fallen. But then I'm going to rebut this, and I'm going to say this is not the purpose or the function of repetition in Margaret Thatcher's eulogy, okay? And then my specific examples from the text, I'm going to look at the very opening of great to emphasize Ronald Reagan's character, his accomplishments, and then the parallelism that we use. I'm thinking specifically of the one of the opening paragraphs where we had like to mend, to restore, to free. We're going to use that to show that that was his intent versus maybe perception. Anytime a politician first passes something, it's usually met with criticism. And so Thatcher is intentionally trying to emphasize and highlight the good intentions that Reagan had with his policies. And that will appease people who may have disagreed initially or later, because it's cloaked with this motivation to do good, okay? And then if we look, we're gonna go back. This was where we had the parallelism with the juxtaposition. This might be a good thing to put in this body paragraph as well, where we say that we use the repetition to address potentially negative aspects of his presidency, but then each potentially negative aspect is countered with good intention, right? So, you know, when his allies came under attack, oh, that's terrible. Oh, but they could look confidently for his leadership. Oh, when his enemies tested America, oh, it turned out that he was firm and unyielding. Okay, that also might be a good way to transition into our diction and juxtaposition, but I'm just going to add that here as a note. That was approximately line 74. And the parallelism that's going to address, I'll just put negative, even though I think it's potentially negative aspects of presidency coupled with the positive response, okay? All right, kind of run out of room, so I'm not going to add be coupled with positive response. What would it sound like for me to have my topic sentence, my body paragraph 1, opening up with a counter argument? Let me just say something and give a listen so you can hear what would this sound like, maybe even a little of the rebuttal in. So you'd want to word something maybe along the lines of, a eulogy bogged down in repetitive words or phrases often succeeds in boring its audience. And then when aimed at a fallen politician, repetition may seem hyperbolic, a way of attempting to capture one's great deeds and political prowess at a time when few might object or correct. So that was all the counter argument. Then you'd want a line that would function as a rebuttal. And when you're going to rebut something, it's really important, folks, that you use a transition. So I would, I'm going to use yet here, and I would say, yet this is neither the purpose nor the function of the repetition Thatcher uses to capture Ronald Reagan's compassionate heart and clever mind. Then I can go right in to Thatcher begins her eulogy with the purposeful repetition of the word great. And I might actually quote, what was it? Great man, great leader, oh, great president, great American, great man, okay? You could even, if you wanted to expand on that further, because remember, you have to expand. What a thing to say a president, which is really remote, American, which unifies, And then man, it takes it down to the most humble of origins, that yes, he was a leader, but he was also an American, and he was a man just like any one of us. Okay, I think I've given you plenty of instruction for that body paragraph, and you see, and you listened, you were able to hear me speak out and a topic sentence for that body paragraph that first presented a counter and then a rebuttal. Now, can you have counters and rebuttal in both of your body paragraphs? Absolutely, it's up to you. For body paragraph number 2, the main thing that I want to talk about is how to evoke a strong emotional reaction in leaders. Thatcher's going to use powerful diction. Margaret Thatcher uses powerful diction while carefully juxtaposing Reagan and his inherent goodness. So I'm just going to put RR goodness with the potential evil of the rest of the world. So juxtaposing Ronald Reagan and his inherent goodness against or with the potential evil. I use the word evil, that says word, purposefully because it is a word that was in the passage, in the excerpt, and sometimes we like to echo that verbiage. And so one of the things that I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually go right back to this section here, and I'm going to say, leading from here, that, and that says line 74, we are pitting when others did bad, he did good. It actually comes into a system of like binaries. Ronald Reagan, good, world, bad. So anytime something bad was happening in the world, it's countered with his good. And if I explain this, because remember, it's not enough to just assert something and leave it there. It's not enough to say that Ronald Reagan did good things when everyone else was trying to do bad things. The end. You can't walk away from that. You have to now explain, so what? What's the impact of that on Thatcher's audience? Well, the impact is it's going to contrast his sunny outlook and his good humor to the harsh realities of the world in which he operated. War, the Cold War, the economy, things like that. So there's a purpose there, there's an impact there. We have to make sure we have that. We're also going to cite several of the words, and I'm just going to write diction here. Cite positive or the negative words that appear. And I would certainly end this with a quote, a direct quote from one of the last paragraphs with the large-hearted magnanimity that encapsulates Ronald Reagan, according to Thatcher. I would also pair this with the image of Ronald Reagan carrying the American people, because again, she is trying to, let me change colors so that you can follow along. Thatcher is trying to accurately capture a man she knew and admired, okay? And so she wants to leave this image here in the minds of the American people as they grieve the loss of their former president, all right? Okay, so we have outlined, you are ready to write. Good luck.